Your 7-year-old is in the bath. About school, about a frog they saw at lunchtime, about a kid who got in trouble for swearing. If you're listening, something at home has shifted. Maybe recently, maybe a long time ago. Welcome, I'm Remy. This is CoParentSpace, the calm space for parents and children living between two homes. What you'll hear is grounded in attachment science and clinical research. It isn't therapy, and it isn't medical or legal advice. If you or your child are struggling, please talk to someone who can help in person. This is a quiet place to think. It doesn't take sides. Here's today's piece. Tuesday night. Your 7-year-old is in the bath. They've been chatty about school, about a frog they saw at lunchtime, about a kid who got in trouble for swearing. Then a pause. They're looking at the water. They ask with no preamble, "Will Daddy be at my wedding?" You don't have an answer ready. You feel the question land somewhere in your sternum. You say carefully, "That's a long way away, but yes, probably." They don't say anything. They tip a cup of water over their head, and that seems to be the end of it. You make a mental note. The next morning, they're cheerful again. The bath conversation could have been from another life, but it stays with you. You feel like something just happened that you didn't quite catch. Your child is grieving. Something happened in that bath. Your child stepped for 30 seconds into a wider awareness of what their life has become. They thought about a future event, their wedding, and noticed with a clarity that surprised them as much as you that the family that should be there isn't quite the family they have. That awareness is grief. The instinct watching your child grieve is to fix it, to say the right thing, to find the right words, to pull them out of it. The instinct comes from love, and it's the wrong instinct. Children's grief work isn't something you can do for them. It's something they have to do, in their own time, in their own loops. Your job isn't to lead them through it. It's to be available when they need to step into it for 30 seconds at bath time, and to be available when they step out again. What that looks like in practice. You don't bring it up unprompted. "Are you feeling sad about Daddy?" Asked into a moment of calm, gets a no, and closes the door. You wait for them to bring it up. When they bring it up, you receive it. You don't redirect. You don't reassure too quickly. "That's a long way away," in response to the wedding question, is fine. You didn't lie. You didn't catastrophize. You didn't force a bigger conversation than the child asked for. You let the question be the question. You hold the routine steady. Grief comes in flashes. Routine is the container. The child who's grieving needs the bedtime to still be the bedtime. The morning to still be the morning. The school run to still be the school run. The structure is the parent's contribution to the work. You don't compete with the idealized memories. You don't compete with the other home. You let your child love both versions of their family. The one they have and the one they remember. Both are real to them. You stay watchable. You don't perform okayness. If you're sad, the child knows. If you're hiding sadness, the child also knows, and learns that sadness is what we hide. Show the child that hard feelings can be present without being catastrophic. When grief is something more. Most of the time, what looks like grief is grief, and grief is the right response. Your child isn't depressed. Your child isn't damaged. Your child is doing the work. A small number of times, something more is going on. The signs to watch for. Over weeks, not days. Sleep that doesn't recover. eating patterns that stay disrupted, mood that stays flat, withdrawal from things that used to bring joy with no recovery, talk of not wanting to be alive, any statement about death that isn't curiosity, aggression toward themselves, toward siblings, toward pets that's new and sustained, a child whose stability is visibly cracking week over week. These warrant more than the kind of holding this episode is about. Module 14, Article 07, the therapy question, addresses when and how to bring in clinical support. Module 16 covers children's mental health more deeply. If you're seeing any of the above sustained, the next move is your child's doctor. Gentle, factual, the patterns you've noticed, the question of whether they need more than what you can give them. You aren't failing if your child needs more support than you can provide. You're noticing what they need and you're getting it for them. That's the same job, scaled up. Closing. Your child is grieving. They are doing the work of holding their life, both halves of it, the one before and the one after, the one at this house and the one at the other, and weaving it into something they can carry forward. The grief isn't damage. The grief is the price of having had something to lose. And they had something. They had a family that was one family. Now they have a family that's two. That's a real loss. Their body knows it. Their mind knows it. Their grief is the proof that they were paying attention. What you do for them is be there for it. In flashes. When they let you see it. Be there for the bath time question. The Monday afternoon meltdown. The anniversary they didn't name. The idealized memory you didn't share. The good day that surprises you. And the bad day that didn't have a cause. A long way from now, when your child is grown, they'll remember some of this. Not the schedules, not the rules, not the messages between you and their co-parent. They'll remember whether the bath, on a Tuesday night when they asked an impossible question, felt safe.
Your child is grieving. Your child is also fine. Both are true. Adults often think of grief as something that follows a death. It does, but it isn't limited to that. Grief is the work of holding the gap between the life you imagined and the life you have. Children grieve when their parents separate, sometimes immediately, sometimes years later, sometimes both. The grief isn't a malfunction. It isn't a sign that something has gone wrong with how you handled the separation, or what you said to them, or how the schedule is working. The grief is the right response to a real loss. The mistake parents often make is thinking that if they handled the separation well, the child won't grieve. The opposite is true. A child who is grieving is a child who has registered that something significant has happened. Children who don't grieve haven't bypassed the loss. They've buried it. Often somewhere it will resurface later. So when your child does grieve, in the bath, on a Tuesday night, in a flash that comes and goes, that's the system working. That's your child doing the emotional work of integrating their two homes into a life they can hold. Your job in those moments isn't to fix it, it's to be there for it. What grief looks like in children? Children's grief doesn't look like adult grief. Adults, at our best, sit with grief over hours and days. We notice the weight of it. We talk about it, often badly, sometimes well. We get tired from carrying it. Children's grief is different in 3 ways. First, it isn't constant. Children grieve in flashes, a 30-second moment in the bath, a 2-minute meltdown at bedtime, a morning of unusual quietness, then a normal afternoon. The grief comes and goes, sometimes 10 times in a day, sometimes once a month. The intensity and frequency don't track adult logic. A small thing can trigger a wave. A big thing can pass without visible response. Second, it isn't articulated. Children, especially under 10, don't usually have language for what they're feeling. They might say, "I miss Daddy," but more often they say something less direct. "I don't want to go to school today. I hate this jumper. Everyone's mean. Why does this always happen?" The words are sometimes the surface of something underneath. The job isn't to translate, it's to hold. Third, it doesn't have a shape. Adult grief has a vague trajectory: shock, wait, gradual reintegration. Children's grief loops. They grieve at 5, then again at 8 when they newly understand what their family looks like, then again at 12 when they reach the age you were when they were born. The loops aren't regressions. Each one is the child taking up the work again at a new developmental level. You won't see all of it. Most of your child's grief is happening without your knowing. The parts you do see are the small surface of a larger underwater body of work the child is doing every week of their life. The shape of children's grief at different ages. A short orientation, age by age, because what grief looks like at 3 is different from what it looks like at 13. The toddler, 0 to 3. Grief at this age is mostly somatic. The child doesn't have words. What they have are bodies, and the body holds the loss. Sleep regression, eating changes, clinginess, unusual irritability, recurring small illnesses, the toddler who suddenly won't go in the car they used to like. These aren't symptoms to fix. They're the toddler version of grief work. Holding is the response. Extra cuddles, extra patience, the routines kept steady, even when the toddler seems to be testing them. The preschooler, 3 to 5. Words are arriving, but they're still operating with magical thinking. Daddy left because I was bad. Mommy doesn't love me anymore. If I'm very good, will they come home? These framings aren't lies the child is telling themselves. They're the developmentally normal way a preschooler tries to make sense of a loss that adults can barely make sense of. The parent's job is to name what's true without flooding the child with information they can't carry. Mommy and Daddy aren't together anymore. That isn't because of anything you did. It's a grown-up thing, and we both still love you very much. Said many times, over many weeks, in many different bath times. The school-age child, 6 to 12. This is when grief becomes most observable and often most articulate. Children at this age can sit with the loss for longer. They can talk about it, sometimes with surprising precision. They can also act it out, drawing pictures with one parent missing, writing stories about families that are together, asking questions that pierce. They can also bury it, often for long periods. A school-age child who seems untouched by the separation isn't necessarily fine. They may have decided that you need them to be fine, and they're being fine for your sake. This is its own kind of work to watch for. The teenager, 13 to 17. Teen grief looks like teen everything. Sudden withdrawal, anger that seems disproportionate, cynical comments about family that mask softer feelings, intense friendships that take on the weight of what they aren't getting at home. They often process more with their peers than with their parents. And that's both age-appropriate and disorienting for the parent. The teenager version of grief work is rebuilding identity around a fact, the separation, that's now part of who they are. This is large work, slow work, and mostly invisible. The shapes that surprise you. Children's grief does several things that surprise parents who are watching it. The good day, then the bad day. Your child has a great weekend, loose, funny, generous, you exhale. Then Monday afternoon, something tiny, a missing toy, a refused snack, produces a meltdown that doesn't fit the cause. This isn't your child being unreasonable. The good weekend opened something, and the something is now leaking. The meltdown is on schedule. The anniversary. Children mark dates more than parents realize. The day Daddy left, the week of the last family holiday before everything changed, the Christmas in the new house. Sometimes the child names the date. More often they don't, and you only notice in retrospect that the bad week was the week of an anniversary. Note them when you spot them. The child often doesn't know that's what's happening, but their body does. The idealization phase. 6 months in, your child starts talking about how things used to be. The way Daddy used to make pancakes, the holiday you all took the year before everything changed, the bedtime ritual that used to involve both of you. The memories are sometimes accurate, sometimes mythologized. The child isn't trying to make you feel bad. They're trying to hold on to something that's been lost. The phase passes. Don't compete with it. The seemingly too okay phase. Sometimes your child is genuinely okay. They've integrated something, they're in a stretch of stability, they're growing in other directions. This is real. But sometimes the okay-looking phase is a child who has decided you can't take anymore, so they're handling it themselves. The way to tell the difference isn't to test them or to ask them outright. It's to watch the small markers: sleep, appetite, the freedom of their laughter, whether they seek you out for hard things. If those are intact, the okay is real. If those have thinned out, the okay is performance, and your child needs you to make it safer for the not okay version to come out. Your job is to make space, not to lead.
That's today's piece. If it helped, the full written version, and more like it, are at CoParentSpace.com. Be gentle with yourself. I'll be here next time.